Indiana may be a must-win state for some of the candidates, but the focus of the campaign trail is California. Ted Cruz is behind in the polls, but threw a Hail Mary this week, naming Carly Fiorina his running mate if he were to get the nomination. He also faced criticism from ex-House Speaker John Boehner. Boehner called Cruz, quote, Lucifer in the flesh, and said Cruz would be president over his dead body. Cruz fired back Thursday and said there will be a contested convention. Meantime, rumors are swirling that Donald Trump is courting Bernie Sanders supporters. Is a Trump-Sanders ticket out of the question? A lot to talk about. The race for the White House is our topic this half hour. We want to hear from you on our Fox 26 Facebook page. You can also weigh in on Twitter. Use the hashtag Fox26forlife. Joining us live in the newsroom is our panel, led by our senior legal analyst, Chris Tritico. We have attorney Nomi Hussein joining us today, and Republican strategist and public policy analyst Jackie Bally. Where to start after this week? A lot of developments.
Craziest week I've seen in a long time. Ted Cruz had one bad week. The only person I can remember who had a week this bad in politics was the week Richard Nixon had to admit he lied. This is the week started out with this pact, if you will, between Ted Cruz and Kasich to split primaries and pull out of primaries to try to derail Trump. That lasted about a minute, and Kasich basically pulled out of it, and Ted Cruz then had to deny that it ever happened. Then Ted Cruz said, well, I'm going to name a vice presidential running mate, and he named Carly Fiorina. That got 0 bump in the polling. That didn't help. So Carly Fiorina's vice presidential run will be the shortest in American history, and nothing seems to be taking hold on this. Ted Cruz said himself that Indiana is the bellwether on whether or not they can stop Donald Trump. Now he's moving on to California. And then to end the week, John Boehner, I'm not surprised about this, but John Boehner steps out and calls him a miserable SOB, Lucifer in the flesh, and says, over my dead body, this guy will be president. This was one bad week for your man, Ted Cruz.
Well, this is why we like politics, because just last week or the week before, we were saying it was the worst week for Donald Trump. You know, and Hillary Clinton was saying in 2008, it was the worst year for her. So that's why we like politics, because we never know what's going to happen tomorrow. No, we're not surprised by Boehner's comments. We talked about that. That was a topic of the show 2-3 years ago. Ted ran as an outsider. He defeated someone who he wasn't supposed to defeat. He ran on the premise and the platform of working against the Washington establishment. As a result, the Boehners of the world never liked him. They made that clear from day one. And I think what a lot of liberals don't understand is they come up to me all the time. They're like, you know, you're good friends with Ted, and they don't like him in D.C. They think that's a bad thing. Ted's voters and supporters appreciate that. That's why they voted for him. Very few politicians run on a platform and still keep their word when they're elected. Ted did.
But the week that Ted Cruz had did not help him against Donald Trump.
Absolutely not. The reality that Republicans have to face now is Ted Cruz is not going to get the nomination. Donald Trump is going to be unstoppable. He's going to get the 1,237 delegates he's going to need before the convention. The convention is not going to be contested. Whether Donald Trump wins Indiana or loses Indiana, he's going to get to where he needs to be. And the other thing the Republicans need to confront is, by Donald Trump winning by such wide margins, in some states close to 60%, in the Republican primary, he is representing the views of the majority of the Republicans voting in the primaries, which is very problematic for the mainstream Republican Party.
I mean, he wins Indiana. It looks like he's going to win California. That should do it.
Oh, well, we've been saying that. We've been saying that mathematically, he is the only candidate in the party that can make the 1237 before the convention. And I've also been saying if he does not get to the 1237, it will be contested, and that's where Ted has his best shot.
Well, I agree with that.
So you know, the governor of Indiana just endorsed Ted. We're going to see what happens in Indiana. But it all depends if he can get to that 1237. If Ted and Kasich can keep him under that 50 or 40% that he needs to in the next couple of primaries.
Let's go to Sally. She's monitoring our social media.
Okay, let's check in on Twitter right now. At Penn's Curse, quoting Carly Fiorina, says, it matters who our nominee is. You don't just get to slap an R on your jersey and say you're a Republican. Now they've got the hashtag Cruz Fiorina and also the hashtag Indiana primary. This person says the Trump sweep of the 5 eastern seaboard states gives him the decent chance of the delegate majority. Cruz must win Indiana to secure the contested convention. And Charles Campbell says Donald Trump should select Bernie Sanders as his VP, and Bernie should have the courage to accept and make history. We also have some tweets coming in from Take It From Tia, who I didn't get to pull up here, but Tia says the Trump-Sanders ticket is impossible. What do you think about that? I mean, is it really entirely out of the question? They do share some similar views on trade and other things.
I don't see Bernie Sanders ever accepting a Donald Trump ticket. I mean, do you? I mean, I just think that's fantasy. Wait, hang on. I do think that Donald Trump is going to try to court Bernie Sanders voters, but Bernie Sanders is never going to accept that VP offer.
And Bernie Sanders supporters are not interested in supporting Donald Trump. I was speaking to one of the Bernie Sanders people last night that's in charge of his party for the state of Texas. Donald Trump might as well ask Rosie O'Donnell to be his VP. But let me say one more thing. An important point Jackie brought up is, you know, Ted Cruz says he's an outsider. He's not part of the Republican establishment. The thing that Ted Cruz needs to think through is if the convention is contested, who do you think is going to be running the convention? It's the Republican establishment, which clearly cannot stand Ted Cruz. So he has to think through this. He can't have his cake and eat it too.
Well, we've been looking at the grassroots, and that's not entirely true. And you have a lot of grassroots activists who love and adore Ted Cruz. That's why he was elected such a wide margin in Texas. But I want to go to a point that you made about Bernie Sanders. I don't think Trump is courting Bernie Sanders personally to be on his ticket. However, there is a huge overlap in Bernie Sanders supporters and in Trump supporters. And if Democrats think that Bernie Sanders supporters are going to automatically line up with Hillary, they are sadly mistaken. I've spoken to quite a few people in Houston supporting Bernie Sanders, and they said that they're not going to support Hillary because they feel she's a criminal.
There's a whole movement of people who say they will never vote for Hillary who are supporting Bernie Sanders, but I don't know that they're going to necessarily jump behind Donald Trump either. We got to leave it right there. Yeah. We got to leave it right there. We'll be back next week wrapping up the hottest stories of the week. Hope you have a great week.
Okay. Hey.